All right, Chav Amid Beis is the last perek in Chagiga, the last chapter of Chagiga. Perek Shlishi. This perek is a continuation of the last few pages in Perek Sheni. The last few pages in Perek Sheni, we discussed the different levels of tuma. So to give a quick recap.
But who doesn't see
To give a quick recap, so we said that there's different levels in tuma. A dead body will be a vaisa tuma, then goes ava tuma, which could be a person or an animal, a sheretz, and then they in turn make other people tame or kalim. So an ava tuma can make a person tame or kalim tame. That's additional tuma. A person can then go on and make food tame, sheni tuma, and that's really where it stops. But we said by terumah, we said that if the apple is an apple of tuma, it can become tame from a sheni tuma, from a second level. The tuma carries all the way through a shlishi, and we're talking about kodeshim. We're talking about animals, a korban, a certain korban that are kodeshim. They carry it through to Levi, and chamishi is the paladuma, the water of the paladuma. The paladuma can carry, the tuma goes all the way. This is the rabbanan. They made an extra chumah, the extra stringency around the inyan of tuma and tahara. So in our Mishnah, it's basically continuing a little bit. It's a very interesting Mishnah. It mentions 11 different differences between kodeshim and tuma. Then the Gemarrah is going to analyze a little bit. Although the page looks scary, it's one large Toises, and I did not have a chance to look at it yet. I do want to look at it because it's usually when the Toises that gets very big, they're very geschmack. But the Gemarrah is fairly simple, a lot of logic, and a lot of interesting things. So let's start. Zog the Mishnah. The stringency of kodesh, of a kolban, over tuma. It's stricter than tuma. And now it enumerates 11 things. Number 1, shematbilim kelim b'tech kelim letuma. So you have a keli. You have a, let's say this is a keli, and you have another keli inside, and you want to toivel both of them. So you put them both in a mikvah. So if you put them both in a mikvah and the water goes in, shouldn't be an issue. Everything gets toiveled. So it says when it comes, if you want to go eat tuma, if you want to use this cup or the thing inside to eat tuma, so then if you toivel it in a mikvah, one within the other, no problem. When it comes, if you want to use it for kodeshim, for whatever reason you want to use this for a korban, then this doesn't work. And the Gemarrah is going to bring 2 reasons why this doesn't work. But this doesn't work. So k.b-k'kodesh tuma, shematbilim kelim b'tech kelim, you can toivel kelim, a keli within a keli. For tuma it's good. If you put it inside and toivel it in the mikvah like this, you're good. Avaloy the kodesh, but for kodesh it's not good.
That's a dimmer?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay.
We don't have it today because we don't have mikdash, we don't have tuma, we don't have kodeshim. But I'm saying in those days that concept existed. There were more than abundant said there were going to be machmir on kodesh more than tuma. Second one is each keli has 3 parts. Acharaim is the back, the outside, bottom, the sides, and toich, the inside. Then there's another part called base hatzvita, which the Gemarrah is going to explain later on what this is. So, what does the Gemarrah says? Case number 2. Acharaim v'toich ubeis hatzvita b'tuma v'la b'kodesh. If you have a tuma that abanon, something that abanon said would become tameh, and it touches the outside of a keli, then whatever is inside is good. That is only by terumah. If, however, there's kodesh inside, there's a piece of meat from a sacrifice, a korban inside here, and a tuma touches the outside, it's like electricity. If there's a conduit, it goes all the way through, and everything inside becomes tameh. So acharaim, acharaim v'toich ubeis hatzvita b'tuma. When do we consider each part of a vessel, the acharaim, the outside, the toich, the inside, and the beis hatzvita, separate pieces of a vessel, and they don't transfer the tuma? That's only by tuma. But by kodesh, it doesn't make a difference where the tuma touches. So as soon as the tuma touches the vessel from the outside, everything inside becomes tameh. So acharaim v'toich ubeis hatzvita b'tuma, avlo b'kodesh. That's number 2. Number 3, hanoises amidros, noises atuma. If someone is holding a sandal of a Azav, let's say, or Anida, someone that had emissions, and he's holding the sandal in one hand. Now the sandal is considered the avatuma. The person becomes a additional tuma. However, if he has an earthen vessel, a kli cheres, which a kli cheres doesn't transfer tuma through. If something is inside the kli cheres, if this is made out of porcelain, of stone or whatever, kli cheres, and you put earthenware, yeah. So you put tuma inside, the person that is tamei, additional tuma, because he's carrying a sandal of a tamei person, it doesn't transfer into the kli. But for kodesh, if inside is actually a piece of meat from a kalban, then we say it travels through. So some hanois has some midos. If someone carries the midos, which is a sandal, I said a sandal of the zav person, nois is a tuma, you can carry the tuma. But kodesh, we cannot carry kodesh in an earthen vessel. In the hand itself, you obviously can carry, because if the person becomes tuma, then he would transfer the tuma. But we're talking about it's in an earthen vessel. Big day oichle tuma. This we already had in the last Mishnah. Big day oichle tuma midos lekodesh. If someone is careful and he eats tuma, his garment are not considered toil, not considered washed good enough in order to eat the higher level of kedusha kodesh. Another interesting halacha says like this: Loi kemidas hakodesh midas hatuma. Again, he's repeating that the kodesh is not a tuma. The what? Sheba kodesh. In order to, if you have a garment that you want to wear when you go to eat the kalban, and this garment has some strings, and there's a knot in there, and now you want to toivel the garment in order to put it on to go to the Beis Hamikdash eat the kalban. So you have to toivel the garment. In order to toivel the garment, you have to first untie the knot, then toivel it, then you can retie it. Or if, let's say, you're using a vessel that you want to use in order to whatever with the kodesh, and the vessel is wet, you have to dry the vessel, and then you can toivel it. Why? Because if there's a knot, then it's considered a chatzitza, which means a barrier, and it wouldn't allow the mikveh water to go inside. And if it's wet, it also would be considered some kind of chatzitza. So you have to untie the knot and dry it if it's kodesh. Sagt the Mishnah. Sheba kodesh, matil, you untie it, umenage when you dry it, umadril, and then you can toivel it, v'achar kodesh, then you can tie it again. Ubetumah, and when it comes to tumah, kodesh, you can keep the knot in the garment and toivel it with the knot, and we're not worried about that chatzitza. Sheba kodesh matil, kodesh v'achar madril, and the same thing also with wet. You don't have to wash it off. Kalim, okay. Next halach. When does a vessel become a vessel to be makabel tuma, to become tummy? A vessel becomes a makabel tuma as the moment the vessel is complete, the moment the vessel can hold in itself a certain amount of liquid or whatever. So when someone is in a pottery and he's starting to make his let's say his cup, when it becomes a real cup, nigmara, that is finished doing the vessel, the kelis was finished. That's when it's become a tuma. So a person went and he's making let's say a cup, and he's careful that as he's finishing to make this cup, now he's very careful, make sure nothing tummy touches it. So basically, the cup was made in full tahara. Technically, you would say you could use the cup right away. Take it to Beis Hamikdash. Take the Beis Hamikdash to use for a kodesh and for a kalban. Says the Mishnah, no. When it comes to tuma, yes, you can use the vessel when it was finished, but when it comes to kodesh, now.
Meaning you have to toivel it first.
You have to toivel it first, yeah. Kelim ham nigmarim b'tahara tzrichen tvila kodesh. If a keli was finished, was completed in purity, you would have to put it in the mikveh in order to use it for a kalban. Next one, another interesting halacha, which we can use the same analogy with electricity again. Hakli metzav masha b'toichel kodesh. If you have a basket full of apples, let's say, and someone that's tamei touches one apple in the basket, top apple in the basket, then does the tuma travel? So if it's tuma, if the entire basket is tuma, then it would travel 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Because the tuma would say travels 4. So the first apple is considered lishin. The first apple touches a few other apples; those would be considered sheni. Those second apples touch other apples; that would be considered shlishi, and they touch the V, and that's where the tuma stops. Okay, let's say if they're in a line, it makes it easier to say. If they're lined up and they're all next to each other, if he touches this, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and it stops. That's for terumah. When it comes to kodesh, we don't only say that it stops by 5. It's like electricity. Everything that touches it, done. So the mashna hakli mitzav mash b'toich. If it's in a vessel and he puts his hand inside, mitzav mash b'toich lekodesh avlo tuma. So everything becomes one, and everything becomes tummy when it's talking about kodesh and not tuma. Then we said halacha, which we mentioned it a few times. Haravi b'kodesh posel. Haravi b'kodesh. Sorry, tuma was only shlishi. Haravi b'kodesh posel, v'shlishi b'tuma. We said when we finished last perig, we said that the difference between psul and tamei. Posel means that it becomes tamei itself, but it can't pass on the tuma. And tamei means it's tamei itself, and it can pass on the tuma. So it says, when does tuma become posel? By shlishi, because that's where it stops. When does kodesh become tamei? By avi. Okay, this we had already. Uba tuma. If we said last time that the Chacham said that there's something called yadayim, tumas yadayim. If you don't know what your hands are doing, your hands are considered tamei. So if you have one hand that became tamei with a tuma d'abana, and the other hand is not, so you can technically handle tuma with the other hand. But if you want to handle kodesh, you would have to go to mikvah. Nitmas ubetuma. Im nitmas achas miyadav. If one of his hands became tamei, the other hand is toil, it's pure. But kodesh, you have to toivel both of them. Because they make each other tamei, it travels through. But kodesh avaloi betuma. Sorry, shayad metames chavet b'kodesh avaloi betuma. It doesn't make it toivel. You can eat food that never got wet. So an apple that never got wet. So if an apple never got wet, then it's not a kabel tuma, right? We said it last time. If an apple never got wet, it's not a kabel tuma. So if your hands are tamei of a tuma that will technically travel through with tuma, would make a tuma tamei, but your hands are tamei, but the apple is dry. If the apple is dry, it cannot be mekabel tuma. Then you can, no problem, you can eat an apple that's made of tuma with your hand. That's not a problem. Well, let's say if you hold the apple and give it to a kohen and your hand is tummy, that the kohen can eat it. That's betuma. Avaloi b'kodesh. But if by kodesh was made a chumel, even if the apple was never wet, we still say if someone touched it with a tuma the abanam, the kohen shouldn't eat it, or no one should eat it. Next halacha, ha'aynen, if some relative passed away, so the first day is considered the aynen. Even though the aynen was careful not to go close, not to be within the same building, or not to touch the dead body, he was made sure that he doesn't become tam at all. We are machmir that if you want to eat kodesh that same day, you have to go to mikvah. Even though he made sure that he doesn't touch the dead body, he doesn't get close to it, isn't even not in the same building, he does not tell me we're machmir. Aynen. Someone that was tamei and he went through the cleansing period and then he went to the mikvah and he waited for the night, he went to the mikvah, and now all he's waiting for is to bring a korban the next day. And then even if he brings a korban the next day, because the mikvah that he went to was not for kodesh, the mikvah that he went to was in order to get out of his tuma. If he wants to eat kodesh, then he would have to go to mikvah. So but the tvila isn't good enough for tuma. Okay, so we said 11. We mentioned 11 different halachas, very interesting halachas. The Gemarrah is going to go and start analyzing one by one. So the first one the Gemarrah is going to analyze the first one. What's the first one? We said that Toiveling a kli, a vessel within a vessel, is a problem by kodesh, but tuma is fine. Yeah, you can dip this in tuma, you can use it for tuma, but kodesh it's not good. What's the reason? So there could be two reasons. It could be one could be a chatzitza. When the vessel is on the bottom, then the bottom of the vessel is and the top, the inside top of the outer vessel, no water goes through. So that's considered chatzitz. That's one way to learn it. And the other way to learn it is if you're doing something like this, where it becomes the vessel becomes narrower, what might happen is someone that wants to toivel very small items, and the Gemarrah brings an example, needles that you sew and some other type of needle that you were sewing gold with, put it into, you don't want to lose the needles, very expensive, so what you do is you put it in a bottle, you drop them in, and then you toivel the whole bottle in the mikvah. So it's the same idea, kli b'toich kli. if you allow what the Dove is trying to say, that if you allow this, then someone is going to say, I'm going to put needles in a bottle like this and to the mikvah. And the problem is that the opening of the bottle is not big enough to connect the water that's inside with the water in the mikvah. We'll see that as we go. So the Gemarrah, the kodesh, my time alone. Why can't you toivel a vessel within a vessel by kodesh? Amar Rab Ilah, Rab Ilah gesagt mir, shekveidoi shel kli choitzitz, because the keli inside is heavy, and it sits down. The kveidoi means the gravity.
Wait.
Yeah, but the gravity goes down, so it sits on the bottom of the on the bottom of the kli, and it's chayt as a chatzitza.
Yeah, but then can't you just say that the water actually makes it buoyant?
So that's what the Gemarrah is going to say. That's exactly what the Gemarrah is going to say. If you say that it's chatzitza, there's another case in the Mishnah that says about chatzitza. Now, if you're coming to tell me that chatzitza is not good by kodesh, that having a separation, so it's having something that separates, a barrier, is not good by kodesh, then just say that one halacha that teaches us chatzitza is not good, and then all halachas that chatzitza is not good, you will learn from. Because the Mishnah brings another case of chatzitza, we must say that they are different amount. So either the beginning of the Mishnah is not talking about chatzitza, or the beginning of the Mishnah is talking about chatzitza, but there's a small difference. So that's the Gemarrah. V'amida sefer mishum chatzitza. Sefer already speaks about chatzitza. Reishalav mishum chatzitza. And they should not be talking about chatzitza. What sefer? Which other part in the Mishnah is talking about chatzitza? The Ktana sefer. We learned in the sefer the loy kemidas hakodesh midas tuma. We said what sheba kodesh mati uman give umadbil. By kodesh you have to untie the knot or dry the thing and then toivel. And what do we say? Why do you have to untie the knot? Because of chatzitza. V'achar kodesh v'tuma kodesh v'achar madbil. But basically you're saying we have already a case in the Mishnah that tells us that it is chatzitza, and because of chatzitza you cannot toivel it that way. So if you say the beginning of Mishnah also speaks about chatzitza, it doesn't make sense. Teach us one halacha that chatzitza is problematic by kodesh, and that's it. Don't teach us two cases of chatzitza in the Mishnah. Zog the Gemarrah. So the Gemarrah has two ways of answering it. Either no, it's not chatzitza, or it is chatzitza. So I'm going to ask a question: why do I need two cases? Because each case has to be mentioned. Because if I don't mention each case, you're not going to know the halacha. That's what the Bila is going to go with. We need both cases. If we only tell us the deisha, the story with the vessel, the vessel within the vessel, I would say hainu taima the lakoidesh loy. The reason why when it's coming to you want to be matbel, you want to toivel it in a mikvah in order to have kodesh, and the reason and it's not good if a vessel is within a vessel. Why? Mishum k'veidesh kli the ika, because in such a case, yes, the gravity, it weighs something, it pulls down. So there's a possibility it's not going to be good. But by a knot in a garment, there's no kvedo, there's nothing heavy. So you would say the water will seep through everything, it's not a problem. I will say for the leka kvedo shilkli, but in the sefer when we talk about a garment, the leka kvedo shilkli, we don't have the reasoning that the garment pulls down, it's not pulling down on anything. So ema lakodesh nami, also not considered chatzitza. So therefore the Mishnah, one case talks about gravity, one case talk about knotting. So it's two different things. And if I only mention one, I'm not going to know the other. So now mention the knot. Mention that there's a problem if you have a knotted kli. Why if you have a garment that's knotted? And that's a problem because chatzitza. And then I'll tell you, I will say like this: even though that there's no problem of gravity pulling down the kli, because there's a knot, there's a problem. But then you will know already that anytime there's an issue with gravity, if something pulling down is also not good. So it only teaches the second part. If you only tell us a sefer, we would say why by kodesh, by a garment that is knotted. You say you can't toivel it with the knot mishum de kitla b'maya ahadukim yadik, because the kita, the kesher in water tightens. And the proof of it is many years ago, a bach in yeshiva, I actually remember even who it was, taught me a trick. How to make sure your tzitzis knots don't open up.
Put under hot water.
You soak your nuts. Your nuts. Soak your knots in hot water, and then
give a tug, and
you tug, and it stays forever because it soaks it up, and then it expands. So basically, but it makes the knot harder, makes it stronger. So basically, you would say that in kodesh is also the same problem, because the water makes the knot even a better knot. There's chatzitza. There's separation there. There's a barrier. So here's a problem. But the Reisha in the beginning of Mishnah, where it's not like this, like Mandy mentioned. Now what happens when you add water? It goes up. So we would say, Aval Reisha the Maya Akufi Makfilo. But in the Reisha that if you put water, the water will makfu lemon, or will pick up the inside vessel. Lo yav chatzitza, you would say it's not chatzitza. And taka, as you can see, clear, it's not chatzitza. It goes up. Even if it's a heavier something, if it's empty, then the water will rise. It will rise. So tzlicha, you need both cases. So the first case we need because to teach us that the gravity, even though the water might pick it up, we're still worried about the gravity pulling it down. That's why we need the first case. And the second case we need to tell us that a knot in water by kodesh is not a problem with chatzitza. Okay? That is Rav Ila. Rav Ila Tamei, Rav Ila goes according to his Shita, the Amar Rav Ila, Amar Rav Chanina Bar Papa, Amar Rav Chanina Bar Papa, Esa Maila Shonokan.
I don't know.
What?
If it's the engineering side of me that's bothered by this, but I don't know if it's the gravity. The gravity is the force that pulls things down.
Okay.
It's more like the weight of the object. The heavier it is, then it will fall down. The lighter it is, there's a tendency to rise.
Correct.
Right? So that.
Why does it fall down?
What's that?
Why does it fall down?
It will fall down because of the weight, because there's a force acting on it. There's
Is it not gravity?
Pull. There's a gravitational pull.
Oh, there you go.
Right? That basically keeps it down.
Okay. Anything
Right.
that's heavier than air will go down.
Why does, if you put a stone into water, the stone will float. But if you put if you tie a knot in a string, the string won't float. I mean, the string won't sink because the string has a lot more air between it. So the weight is
You're carrying it up.
It's basically keeping it up. There's more air above, so it's keeping this object up.
So you're saying it's the heaviness of the kli that pulls it up. Okay, not gravity.
Of the
Okay.
vessel.
Shkoyach. Yeah. I gotta redo the my what's it called?
Science class.
Science class, yeah. I'm not worried. My science teacher is definitely not watching this. I don't know if yeah. Anyways, Zog the Gemarrah weiter. So basically, this is Rav Ila. Rav Ila tells us that there are two cases in the Mishnah that teaches us a halacha of chatzitza, of a separation of a barrier between water and the item itself. And each one needs to be taught, but because each one is a little bit different. One is the heaviness pulls it down, and it might touch the bottom, and the water is not going to go through all the way. And that's why kodesh is a problem. The other one is that when it comes to a knot, also the knot might get harder and not let the water in, and therefore we need to teach us both halachas. And we're not going to know if we just teach one of them. Why do we say Rav Ila Tamei? Rav Ila goes according to his Shita. The Amar Rav Ila, Amar Rav Chanina Bar Papa, Esa Maila Shonokan. Rav Ila says very interesting that in this Mishnah, the Mishnah taught us 10 different levels, 10 different differences between tuma and kodesh. But there's 11. If you count, you'll find 11. Like I said, there's 11. If you actually count, you'll see 11. Why does the Vila say there's 10? Because two of them are the same concept. Two of them are chatzitza, the same concept. And the Vila continues and says another interesting tidbit in this Mishnah. Chamish Hashonis, we said last time or two Shulim ago, we said that there's some people that would be so careful that even when it comes to chulin, mundane food, they would eat it on a level of kedusha of kodesh, and then they would have to be careful, like kodesh, go to mikvah and everything. Toivel for the chulin, they'll have to toivel like for kodesh.
Perushim.
What?
Perushim.
No, Perushim go eat chulin with tahara. Then there's higher. The people that even eat chulin on the level of kodesh. Perushim just make sure they eat the chulin without any impurity, but that's it. But they are eating chulin just like a korban. So Rav Ila is going to say that the first 5 things that I mentioned in the Mishnah, because those things, there's a chashash that the tuma might be somehow a tuma of the Raisa. Therefore, for someone that is careful to eat chulin betahara kodesh, those 5 things would apply for chulin as well. Meaning, if you have a chulin vessel and you want to eat this chulin with your chulin that you're eating on the level of kodesh, and you want to toivel it inside, that's not going to work. Even though it's chulin, even though you're going to eat chulin, that's not going to work. If you want to tie the knot, if you want to wear the garment for eat chulin, but you're eating the chulin on the level of kodesh, then you're going to have to untie it and then toivel it, even though it's chulin. Zat Rav Ilam, Chomesh Rishonos, the first 5 cases in the Mishnah, Bein LeKodesh, Bein LeChulin, Shnai Tzaras HaKodesh, that applies for kodesh, for the actual sacrifice, the korban, or Chulin, Shnai Tzaras HaKodesh, or if you eat Chulin on the level of kodesh. Achdoina is the last one, LeKodesh, yes, Avaloi LeChulin, but even Shnai Tzaras HaKodesh. But the last two that were mentioned, like for example, eating tuma with hands that are eating a dry tuma with hands that are tame, and you want to eat. So the Mishnah said kodesh you can't eat, but chulin shenaisol tahara kodesh you would be able to eat, for example. Okay, so the Gemarrah says, what's the reason? What's the difference between the two, the first 5 and the last 5? My timer. What's the reason? Zog the Mishnah zay, zog the Gemara. Rav Ila continues. The first 5, the islahu draw the tuma midaraisa, because there is a possibility that it might turn into tuma deraisa, and because that's the possibility, goes the Rabbanan ben l'kodesh ben l'chulin. Therefore, the Rabbanan said that if you're so careful by chulin, we want you to be careful for this as well. The last 5, the less of the tuma, there's no way that they would ever reach a tuma deraisa. Goes the Rabbanan l'kodesh. But the chunish nice not as a kodesh loy goes on. Okay, this needs a little explanation because it's missing. Like what are we talking about? Let's see Rashi. Rashi, the 5th Rashi from the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Rashi from the top. Dua the tuma deraisa. What's dua? Chashash tuma deraisa. There is a possibility that this will reach a tuma deraisa. Now tuma deraisa is a problem. Tuma deraisa is not the rabbanon, something that you can find loopholes. If the Torah tells you something is tummy, if the Torah tells you something is tummy and you toivel it this way, and there's a chash for chatzitza, then you're gonna make a problem. If the keli became tummy from a tuma deraisa, now you want to eat even tuma with it or whatever with it, and you toivel it this way, it's a real problem. So that's why even chulin shenaisel tahara kodesh, we're gonna say that you can't do this. That explains Rashi. How can such a case reach tuma deraisa? Kli b'derech kli, like this. If there's a real chatzitza and the kli became tummy because of the deraisa, then you're going to have a problem. You're going to have a problem that you're going to use a vessel, you're going to toivel it this way, and you're going to use a vessel to eat something that something that needs to be eaten by tahara. Therefore, the Chacham said that not only if this is a kodesh vessel, you want to use it for kodesh, do you have to toivel it separately, but also if you want to eat chulin that you eat on a level of kodesh, we tell you that you have to toivel it in separately. We said the second case was that that a vessel has a few different parts, the back, the inside, and a third part. What is it? How can that become deraisa? The tuma. If a vessel becomes tummy midanaisa, if something a mouse touches a vessel, then let's say the entire vessel becomes inside outside, doesn't make a difference. Why? Because the mouse is tummy midanaisa. The Torah tells us the mouse is tummy. So the vessel part could only be such a tumah that is a darabanan. Meaning a sheni or shlishi of tumah touches the vessel. Let's say a sheni of a tumah touches the vessel and inside its tumah, it doesn't travel through. That is only by a darabanan. If the tumah that touches the outside of the vessel is a deraisa, and we don't care, everything becomes tumah. So Rashi here has a problem. The Gemarrah says that this would reach a chashash deraisa. How does that happen? So Rashi says like this: we're talking about tumah derabanan. There's some case where we say the different parts of the vessel are separate. What's the reason the Chacham said that if a tumah derabanan touches a kli outside, the inside could sometimes be tummy and sometimes not be tummy? Why? Because again, I want to take you a step further from making a mistake. What mistake would someone make? They would say that if, let's say, a zav or a nida would spit on a kli outside, oh, it's just a little spit, let me wash it off and everything is fine. But a zav and a zava is ava tumah min deraisa. In order for people not to make the mistake, the Chacham said that I'm going to tell you that anything that touches, even the tumah derabanan that touches the outside of a kli, the inside may become tamei in certain cases if the inside is kodesh, not if the inside is tumah. Follow? Okay? Yeah? So, okay, so hada amar rabbanan mashke metamin kli b'shem gzeira the mashke zava. Who? The reason Chacham say that something wet that touches the kli outside, the inside might become tamei, because we want to make sure that if a zav or a zava touches spit on the kli or piss on the kli, then everything would become tamei because of tuma d'oraisa. The Chacham said, let me make a barrier, let me make another step back, a siag, a boundary that he shouldn't cross that. So basically, if I allow someone to eat chulin that someone would eat kodesh, and I would allow him to eat it if the tuma touched him the outside, then he might make a mistake and say, oh, maybe a zav and zava can touch my kli outside. So therefore the Chacham said that if you eat chulin on such a level of kodesh, if tuma touches the outside, don't eat the chulin.
1 second. The chashash says that maybe the zava are going to touch the outside of the keli.
They're not even going to touch it, they're going to spit on it.
They're going to spit on it, and then regular chulin is not a problem to eat.
Right, but kodesh will be
a problem.
And if you eat chulin, it has a kodesh.
Okay,
Do we tell you don't do it because then maybe There's no difference if it's inside or outside. When it comes to tuma d'oraisa, the entire kli becomes tamei. Okay. The next one case was a noise someone carries a sandal of a zav, of a nida, and then he holds in his other hand an earthen vessel with something inside, either kodesh or tuma. So tuma kodesh he cannot carry, tuma he could. So here, chashash tuma d'oraisa, you can still be a chashash tuma d'oraisa. Why? Because the Gemarrah is going to say later on, someone was walking with a sandal and somehow a piece of the sandal got separated and fell inside, magically fell inside his other hand that was holding the vessel, the earthen vessel. Once it fell inside, everything becomes tamei. So because if you're carrying a tuma d'oraisa and you're carrying kodesh, they might touch. So they also said by chulin, be careful. And the same thing also with the garment. The next case in the Mishnah was about the garment. So someone eats tuma, his garment is considered midos for kodesh because shem yoshval and ishta nida. Again, because maybe his wife that was a nida sat on it and it's chashash d'oraisa. And the same thing. Okay, so basically, this was a mamish side note that Rabbi Ila said that the first 5, the Rabbanan said that even if you eat chulin on the level of kodesh, you should not do those 5, just like kodesh. The last 5, we're gonna be a little more lenient, and you can say that even if you eat chulin on kodesh, you can do it. Zog the Gemarrah weiter. Now the Gemarrah is giving a different reason. The first reason we said, the first opinion was that the reason this is not allowed is because of the issue of chatzitza, and therefore he has to explain that there's 2 cases of chatzitza in the Mishnah. I have to explain the difference between 2 cases. The other has a different shit. Because later on in the Shefa, when we say about the knot, over there we know for sure that an issue over there is because chatzitza. The first part of the Mishnah about the case of a kli b'toich kli, Toiveling a kli within a kli, is not because of chatzitza, so there's a different reason. What's the reason in the Reisha that you cannot toivel if a kli is within a kli? We are worried that someone would go toivel small needles with machatin, v'tznoyos are small pipes, and they said that this is what they would use in order to weave gold. Bekli they would put it into a vessel she'ein befiv k'shveferes hanoid, that the opening of the vessel is not as wide as a shveferes hanoid. Noid is a flask. Those leather flasks. How wide was that opening? Karetnan, we learned in mikvahs, eruv mikvahs, if you have one pit that holds a kosher mikvah, and next to it is a pit that does not have a kosher, there's not enough water, but you want to make sure this water is also good, is also kosher. So what do? You dig a hole, you make a hole between. How big does the hole have to be? So it says, if you want to mix up the water and make one kosher to the other, the width has to be k'shveferes hanoid, like the opening of a flask. Yeah. I'm talking about like the big ones, the ones they used to carry wine and in the olden days. A flask, not a good flask. We're talking about they used to have these big.
Barrel?
Not a barrel. It was a
leather.
Leather, yeah. Something. And then how big was the opening? The opening was k'ovya ukachalola k'shtei etzbos choyz l'mkoymon. It's so thick. It's wide at least that you can put 2 fingers inside and twist it around without a problem. Not that it's hard. You can twist your 2 fingers. That's how big it is. And they say that in those days, old flasks or whatever the thing is called was made in that measurement. That's how big the mikveh hole has to be in order to connect and make the 2 boilers kosher. So the same thing also, if you take a bottle, this is not big enough, and the bottle itself, let's say, is toivel. The bottle is a good. Don't want to toivel the bottle itself. I just want to toivel a bunch of needles, and I don't want to lose the needles. Let me put the needles inside, and let me stick it into the mikveh. Let the water go inside. The problem is now this becomes a vessel for all the water that from the mikveh that goes inside. So it separates itself from the mikveh, and the hole is not big enough to connect the 2 mikvahs. So therefore, he said that's what they said. This we don't allow this because maybe someone is going to toivel something in this. Therefore, we tell you anytime when you put something and make something tighter, don't do that. It's the same idea putting a vessel within a vessel. Savala kaha, Rava holds like the one the Omar of Nachman Omar Abba Avua. Yud Aleph Maila Shonokan, that in this Mishnah we learned 11 differences between tuma and kodesh, and taka according to Rava. There's taka there 11 differences. And he says,
hang on a second, getting back to what you just said. When you put something, even with a big opening or a small opening, into the mikveh, the water joins.
So there's a difference
on both sides.
It's a good question. There's a difference. If I want to toivel a bottle, and the bottle is not big enough, it's a problem. Technically, if the hole is not big enough. But the halacha is, if I want to toivel the bottle, then we say that when you put it inside, the Gemarrah is going to say later on, everything becomes toivel. Everything is good. But if I don't want to toivel a bottle, I just want to use it as a bucket or something, then if it's not big enough, you want the water to be contained inside. You don't want to toivel. You want the water to be contained. Once you want the water to be contained, you're creating a small little mikvah within the mikvah, and then the hole has to be big enough. Okay. So Rabbi continues. Sheish Rishon is the first 6 cases in the Mishnah. Again, the same thing that we said before. Ben lekodesh, ben lechulin, shnais l'taz lekodesh, achonis l'taz lekodesh. That this would apply for kodesh or for chulin that you do on the level of kodesh, like we said before. Achoin is the last 5. Lekodesh, yes, avalo lechulin, shnais l'taz lekodesh. Okay. Now we have a very simple question. So we have 2 opinions, two reasonings behind the first halacha in the Mishnah. The first halacha in the Mishnah is that you can't toivel a kli within a kli. If it's for kodesh, but for tuma you could. So, and Rava and Avila agree that you can't toivel it. They just say the reasoning is different. If the reasoning is different, you have to tell me what kind of case can I apply this same reasoning, and now we'll see that they're different. There has to be a certain case, but otherwise, what difference is the reason? You said Allah done. Figure out one reason. There's a different reasoning because they will hold that when you apply the same logic into a different scenario, the halacha will turn different. So let's see. My benayim, my ika ben the Avila. What differences it could be between the Rav and Avila? 6 lines from the top. Ika benayim, sal vegargosani. We're talking about a sal vegargosani, a very large basket, and the basket has holes in the bottom. Okay, so it's a basket that has holes. This is a basket that we use to filter out wine. They would put it under a wine press. The wine would go down and would filter, I guess, all the what?
Sediments.
Yeah, all everything that's there. So they would filter it out. That's what it was used for. So it's filtered. It seeps through. The holes are tiny. It's supposed to filter it, but the water does go through. So now, if we are using shemilon kelim, if I fill a basket full of those things, vehid bilon, and I took the basket, I dunk it in this huge basket that has a lot of tiny holes. The water goes through, and I put kelim inside, I put vessels inside, and I toivel in a mikveh like that. So now, even if there's a hole here, if a vessel sits on top, it might sit on a piece that is not a hole. So there's still chatzitza. So for that, if the reasoning is chatzitza, you still can't do it. If the reasoning is that I'm worried about putting in something into other thing and closing it, there will be a tight thing. No, that's not the case because here it's open from all sides. Lemando mishum chatzitza iko. That's a problem. Lemando mishum gzeira shum yad b'machtem v'tznoyers b'kli she'em b'fivka sheferes noid. That I'm worried if I toivel like this, I might come to toivel a keli that is too narrow on top. Salvegagasani she'em b'fivka sheferes noid. Like it doesn't have that issue with a tight opening. So the halacha would be very different when we're talking about a basket. And the Gemarrah continues and says, the Rava goes according to his opinion, this type of basket, Shemilan Kaelin, he says it very clear, Shemilan Kaelin, to fill it up with vessel, Bilan Tehoyin. It's time. Then he continues on a separate halacha, not connected to before, but we're using the same type of vessel, same type of basket that has a bunch of holes. If someone had a mikveh exactly for the saw and he puts the divider in between, what kind of divider? This type of weaved basket or so whatever it was, it has small tiny holes. If someone toivels in one of the two sides, the tefillah is not good. Why? Because the holes are too small to connect. What's the proof? A very interesting proof. We know that the world, every single continent sits on water. Everything sits on water. We've learned it in everything sits on water. The whole world sits on water. If you dig deep enough, you might get to the core. Eventually, you might get to some water, to think of water. So basically, he said that the earth is full of holes. So technically, make any gathering of water should be kosher. Why? Because it connects to the water that's all deep down there. Down there is definitely kosher. Definitely for the sun. But why? Why don't you say it's kosher? Because the hole is not big enough. The holes in the ground are not big enough. Zog the Gemarrah, what's the proof? The world, the earth, the floor is all porous. Yeah, it's all holes. And we still require 40 so in one place. And we don't say that let him just connect to the bottom. Why? Because the hole is not big enough. You have to have a bigger hole. And the Gemarrah is continuing, and we'll continue next week in Maseches Chagiga.